Close your eyes and picture Cleopatra. You're probably seeing dark eyes lined with kohl, bronze skin, black hair styled in that iconic Egyptian way, the embodiment of ancient Egypt, the last pharaoh, the ultimate Egyptian queen. Now here's the twist. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian. Not even a little bit. She was Greek, completely, thoroughly, unmistakably Greek. Her bloodline traced back to Macedonia, not Memphis. Her ancestor wasn't some ancient Egyptian dynasty. It was one of Alexander the Great's generals. For nearly 300 years, Egypt's most famous rulers weren't Egyptian at all. They were foreign invaders who never bothered to learn the local language, who kept to themselves, who married each other to keep the bloodline pure. And Cleopatra? She was the culmination of that bizarre legacy. This is the story of how Egypt's most famous queen wasn't actually Egyptian. The general who became king. Let's rewind to 323 BC. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who conquered half the known world, has just died. He's 32 years old. His empire stretches from Greece to India, and he hasn't named an heir. What follows is chaos. Alexander's generals immediately start carving up the empire like a pie. They're not interested in preserving his legacy. They want their peace. One of these generals is Ptolemy. He's smart, calculating. While the others fight over the heartland, Ptolemy makes a strategic choice. He takes Egypt. It's brilliant. Egypt is rich, stable, easy to defend. It has the Nile, which means food and trade. It has ancient prestige. And most importantly, it's far enough from the others that he can build something lasting. Ptolemy doesn't just occupy Egypt. He transforms himself into a pharaoh. He adopts the trappings, the titles, the imagery. He positions himself as the legitimate successor to thousands of years of Egyptian rule. But here's what he doesn't do: integrate. Ptolemy and his descendants remain thoroughly Greek. They speak Greek. They worship Greek gods alongside Egyptian ones. They bring in Greek artists, Greek philosophers, Greek culture. Alexandria, their capital, becomes a Greek city planted on Egyptian soil. And most tellingly, they marry each other. Brothers and sisters, uncles and nieces. The Ptolemaic dynasty becomes infamous for keeping it in the family, literally. For 300 years, the Ptolemies rule Egypt without ever becoming Egyptian. They're tourists playing dress-up, foreigners wearing the crown. And Cleopatra is the last of this long, strange line, a dynasty of Greeks. By the time Cleopatra is born in 69 BC, the Ptolemaic dynasty has been ruling Egypt for nearly 250 years, and they've barely changed. They still speak Greek at court, still worship Greek gods, still marry their siblings, Cleopatra's own parents, brother and sister, her grandparents, also brother and sister. This isn't just a family tree, it's a family wreath. The Ptolemies have created a bizarre parallel society. There's Egyptian Egypt, the farmers, the priests, the common people. And there's Greek Egypt, the royal court, isolated and insular, floating above the rest of the country like a foreign bubble. Most of the Ptolemaic rulers never even bother learning Egyptian. Why would they? They have translators, intermediaries. They don't need to speak to their subjects directly. For nearly 3 centuries, Egypt's rulers can't talk to their own people. It's colonialism with a crown, occupation with ancient credentials. And this is the world Cleopatra is born into. The queen who broke the mold. But here's where Cleopatra becomes fascinating, because unlike her ancestors, she actually tries. Cleopatra learns Egyptian. She's the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to speak the language of the people she governs. It's such a radical act that historians still marvel at it. She doesn't stop there. She learns multiple languages. Ancient sources say she spoke 9 languages fluently: Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, and more. In a dynasty of isolated rulers, Cleopatra is a polyglot. She also engages with Egyptian religion in ways her ancestors never did. She presents herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis. She participates in Egyptian rituals. She uses Egyptian symbolism alongside Greek. Cleopatra is trying to bridge the gap, to be both Greek and Egyptian, to finally unite the two worlds that have existed side by side for centuries. But make no mistake, she's still Greek. Her education is Greek. Her cultural reference points are Greek. When she seduces Julius Caesar, she does it with Greek philosophy and wit. When she meets Mark Antony, she stages elaborate Greek theatrical productions. Cleopatra speaks Egyptian, but she thinks in Greek. The image versus reality. Here's the irony. The woman we picture when we think ancient Egypt wasn't Egyptian at all. Those images of Cleopatra with Egyptian styling, historical revisionism. She probably looked far more Greek than Egyptian. Lighter skin, Greek features, Greek clothing, at least in private. The elaborate Egyptian makeup and clothing we associate with her? Ceremonial, symbolic, public relations. When Cleopatra needed to present herself as a legitimate Egyptian pharaoh, she dressed the part. But in her private life, in her court, among her family, she was Greek through and through. Even her famous beauty, endlessly romanticized, was probably more about charisma than appearance. Ancient sources suggest she wasn't conventionally beautiful. What made her irresistible was her voice, her wit, her intelligence, her charm, all of which she cultivated through Greek education and Greek culture. We've created this image of Cleopatra as the ultimate Egyptian icon. But the real Cleopatra was a Greek woman playing the role of an Egyptian queen, and she was brilliant at it. Why it matters? You might be thinking, so what? Does it really matter if Cleopatra was Greek or Egyptian? Yes, it does, for several reasons. First, it reveals how colonialism worked in the ancient world. The Ptolemies ruled Egypt for 300 years without ever becoming Egyptian. They extracted wealth, claimed legitimacy, wore the symbols, but never integrated, never truly belonged. Second, it shows how we construct historical narratives. We've turned Cleopatra into the symbol of ancient Egypt. But she was actually the symbol of something else, of foreign rule, of cultural appropriation, of dynasties that lasted by staying separate. Third, it complicates our romantic notions of the past. Cleopatra's story isn't a fairy tale about an Egyptian queen. It's a complex tale about identity, power, and the ways outsiders claim belonging. She was brilliant, strategic, remarkable, but she wasn't what we think she was. The end of the line. Cleopatra's reign ends in 30 BC. After Mark Antony's defeat and their double suicide, Egypt falls to Rome. The Ptolemaic dynasty is finished. And with it ends one of history's strangest experiments, a Greek dynasty ruling Egypt while remaining fundamentally Greek. For 300 years, the Ptolemies maintained this impossible balance. They were pharaohs who couldn't speak Egyptian, kings of a land they never truly joined, rulers who stayed foreign even as they claimed legitimacy. Cleopatra tried to bridge that gap. She learned the language, embraced the culture, tried to be both Greek and Egyptian. But in the end, She was still Ptolemy's descendant, still Alexander's heir, still fundamentally Greek. Egypt's last pharaoh was a Macedonian general's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. And that's one of history's greatest ironies. The legacy of misunderstanding. 2,000 years later, we still get it wrong. Movies cast Cleopatra with Egyptian styling. Textbooks present her as the embodiment of ancient Egypt. Popular culture treats her as the ultimate Egyptian icon. But historians know better. The DNA evidence, what little we have, points to Greek ancestry. The historical records are clear. The language she spoke at court was Greek. The culture she practiced was Greek. Cleopatra was Greek. And yet the myth persists, because we want her to be Egyptian, because the story is better that way, because Egyptian queen sounds more romantic than Greek colonizer playing pharaoh. But the truth is more interesting than the myth. The truth is that history is messy, complicated, full of outsiders who claim insider status, full of rulers who wear crowns that don't quite fit. Cleopatra's story isn't about an Egyptian queen who ruled Egypt. It's about a Greek woman who tried to become Egyptian, who learned the language when her ancestors couldn't be bothered, who engaged with the culture when her family remained isolated. She was a bridge between worlds, an outsider trying to become an insider, a foreign queen attempting to belong. And that's a far more compelling story than the myth we tell ourselves. The final truth. So the next time you picture Cleopatra, the Egyptian queen with her elaborate makeup and dramatic gestures, remember this. She was Greek. Her ancestor was one of Alexander the Great's generals. Her family spoke Greek for 300 years. Her education was Greek. Her worldview was Greek. Egypt's most famous queen wasn't Egyptian at all. She was a Macedonian playing an Egyptian on the world's biggest stage, and she played the role so well that 2,000 years later, we still believe it. That's not a flaw in Cleopatra's story. That's the genius of it. She made herself into whatever she needed to be, Greek when it suited her, Egyptian when it mattered, Roman when necessary. Cleopatra's real power wasn't her beauty or her seduction. It was her ability to be everything to everyone, to adapt, to transform, to claim belonging wherever she went. She was a chameleon in a crown, a foreigner who became an icon, a Greek who became the symbol of Egypt. And that paradox, that beautiful, complicated contradiction, is why we're still talking about her today.